somewhat more reassuring. All right. Anyway, good. So I figured out the problem. It was not Apple, it was my fault. When you plug in HDMI, then the sound goes externally out there and is not controlled by the Mac anymore. So it took the sound control off my bar because that was not the right way to do it. Anyway, what I was hoping to show you was this bed, but I think I'll forget that one. All right, so these guys are trying to get investors to give them money so that they can sell designer babies. And they're predicting like tens of thousands of these designer babies being sold soon. And they seem to just be skipping over what would appear to be insurmountable legal obstacles. But anyway, you can get in on the ground floor of this and then people will be buying sugar babies. But I don't know quite how they're going to get past any government with that. Hilton Hotels has been telling people to just send their credit card information over Twitter. If you have a problem, they want you to tweet your credit card information to them, which is pretty hilarious because I think just 2 weeks ago, Twitter had a big vuln where they were leaking out all the private messages. So anyway, that's not a good idea. And it's surprising that nobody has informed them. This is pretty amazing. She sent text to her boyfriend to convince him to commit suicide, and now she is going to prison for that, which would seem to directly contradict the First Amendment, and has always been considered so in the past. But apparently America's attitude about free speech and libel are changing. And as a matter of fact, I guess this would be libel because text messages. Anyway, it's interesting because previous cases, people were not punishable for just sending messages, even if they had a bad result. And this one is interesting. There are databases that private eyes can get to, and also criminals, but also bounty hunters that give your location data, and they have not only where your cell phone towers put it, but also where the GPS puts it, which is something that people thought was not available, but it turns out it is available. This is not much of a surprise to people that go to Hope. There's a detective that gives a talk there every time talking about all this stuff, but I think it was not widely appreciated. There's a new 0-day that lets you steal the passwords out of the keychain, even other people's passwords out of the keychain without administrative privileges on a Mac, reportedly. But I don't think there's a proof of concept out there. What's interesting, one of these, I'm not sure it's this one. Yeah, he didn't report it to Apple, and he hasn't even told Apple how it works so they can patch it, because he's mad about the fact that Apple has no bug bounty program for the Mac OS. They have one for the iPhone, but not for the Mac OS. So we'll see what comes of all that. And so they're getting excited about this. I heard about this about a year ago in Britain. They're going to censor the porn off the internet, and you're going to have to prove that you're an adult to get it, and they're going to record who you are. So as the many people are worried that this will be the step towards what Putin said he wanted years ago. He wanted to end anonymity on the internet. He wanted everybody to have to use their real identity for everything they post, and that would end a whole ton of problems. And it certainly would, of course. It'd end, revenge porn and spam and all sorts of things, but it would also mean, of course, that the government can clamp down on political dissent, which one imagines is probably what he wants. Yeah.
Like, how would they acquire ID though? Like picture ID or they would
probably credit card. Credit card is usually what they do, but they're talking about it. But apparently this is really going to happen. So there are 3 or 4 choices. You can show up with your passport in physically and get a card, or you can do other things. But the main thing is what people think is they'll probably extend this to filter social media. And I wouldn't be surprised if they start doing it here too, because there's a huge backlash because of the Russia investigation to try to censor political content on the internet here too. And this is one way to do it, yeah.
And there's also there's also impersonation users. They impersonate someone as that user, but it's not true.
I don't know about that one. But there certainly are ways to impersonate people on in various services, but I'm not aware of any way to impersonate someone on Facebook or anything. What's that?
It's actually quite easy to do that.
How do you do that?
Just like you would get someone's photo and say, I am this person.
Oh, but you can make another account with the photo on it, but you can't take over their account. Oh yeah, you can certainly make clone accounts and spoof accounts. People do that all the time. That's true. So that's another reason why you don't know who you're talking to. That's what happened to Sarah Palin. She was using like a Yahoo account for official government business, So somebody just made like a Hotmail account in the same name and you can't tell which one's real. That's why you should use the official company account for company business. Anyway,
that's why people put the real.
What's that?
That's why people put the real.
Oh yeah, the real thing. And that's also why Twitter has verified accounts, which where they've actually made some effort to prove that you are who you think you are. So the whole point of Ethereum was to run apps on top of the blockchain, but it turns out that almost nobody's using it because of CryptoKitties. About 6 months ago, CryptoKitties was the first app that really hit big time and totally froze the blockchain. It was unable to handle the amount of traffic as soon as an app got popular, and everybody realized Ethereum doesn't work. You can only make a prototype. As soon as it starts getting used, the blockchain is not fast enough. So they're using other blockchains that apparently are much faster. They claim to be thousands of times faster. And the founders of Ethereum are really mad and say that they're faster because they're not decentralized, which is, of course, how you do it. That's how fast computers work. You have one central server, and you only do each calculation once instead of doing a million copies. That's why I sort of like when I talk about the crypto class, there's one coming up from Britain that uses sharding. So you do not duplicate the calculation on every computer. You choose a sampling computers to verify it so it can't be forged, but only a small sample. And really, you only process your data, not everybody's data, so that it is more scalable. But it is still not even released yet. It's still just being developed. So this is pretty awesome. The National Enquirer blackmails people, and they leak out secrets. And now Jeff Bezos just dumped out his secrets and said, I'm not going to permit to your blackmail. Trump certainly got them to cooperate with him to hide things about him. And that's all come out as part of the Mueller investigation. It's not entirely clear whether what they're doing is illegal, but it probably is. Anyway, there's a big scandal about apps recording your screens without your knowledge, but I tried very hard to reproduce this, and my impression is that this doesn't happen very often. It's really a small issue, just a few apps, but I wasn't able to test modern iOS apps. I was only able to test Android apps, and that came out about 8 months ago, research paper about this, and even they tested something like 8,000 apps, and they only found 20 that did it. Because I'm thinking, if you were a company, how many screen captures do you really want? If you have 1 million users, do you want 10 million screen captures to go through? I wouldn't think so. I would think you'd just turn it on when you have like a bug report to find out what's happening and then turn it off again. So I would think it really wouldn't be on all the time. And when I test apps, I can't find it. So I think it's kind of a tempest in a teapot. Anyway, I want to get back to the official stuff here. So this is CNIT 50 that only meets occasionally. This is the second meeting. The next meeting is a month in 3.9, not on 2.23. And what I want to talk about today is modules 5 and 6, and then the new project, which I'm very happy about. There's going to be a whole series of these, but I spent the last 2 days setting up a cloud Splunk server so you can do boss of the SOC. And so I'll show you that. So let's start with the slides, and then I'll just go to demonstrations of these things. Let me make this full screen for the moment. All right. So this is the stuff that will be on your search tests and you hopefully been practicing. So when you're writing down search queries, you only have to write a couple letters and it will try to help you by guessing. You put the first few words of letters of fail, it'll tell you, yeah, what's up?
I'm going to your website and somehow I'm being informed that you have a Trojan virus.
A Trojan virus. What's saying that?
That's my malware bite.
Yeah, malware bites. As far as I know, that's a false positive from amateur in Romania. But I don't know. There's somebody that flags my homework projects as malware occasionally and puts you in these lists. If you get any details about it, send it to me and maybe I can find out what they're complaining about. But I think there was one guy that detected one homework assignment as malware about a year ago, and I think it's echoing back and forth through all the blacklists. But there could well be a new file that they don't like. I do have a lot of hacking information on my site, and it does set these things off. As far as I know, there's no actual malware. But you're right to be worried. Anyway, so if you check things, it'll try to guess what you mean and offer it to you, which turns out to be very handy because then you don't have to spell things so well. And you can choose various options here. It'll make more suggestions, like most smart things do. It's enabled by default. You can turn it off if you want, but it's on by default, and it's usually quite helpful. There's a full mode to show you more of these things to control how much you get from the search assistant. It also matches parentheses. If you start making complicated searches with layers of parentheses, you might have trouble matching them. So when you type a closing one, it'll highlight the opening one, A lot of editors do this now. My Smalltron editor does this, so you can tell if your parentheses don't match. So if you complete a query, it'll then show you matching results. And we talked about this before. Up here we have failed password. There are 1,942 events. The events are here. The events are these text lines at the bottom, and the events are shown in two different ways. Here is the complete raw event on the right, which is just a long line of text, but you notice it has sort of unparsed information at the top, and then it has this host equals mail serve, source equals something. Those are the fields it actually parsed, where it found some delimiters, it matched a template, and it removed these so it can index by them. So that's so it can more quickly search by. You can search by this general content too, but it's slower and less precise. So if I just search for the word password, it'll find the word password anywhere in the event. But if I search for host equals mail serve one, it'll mean it's right there. So you're highly encouraged for efficiency to use name equals value whenever you can, because that'll search precisely for what you want. And if you just put in a word like you would in Google, you can do that, but it's sloppier and it makes things slower. And you'll see writing efficient searches can save you a lot of time. So that's what's going on here. One thing Splunk always does is pull out the time. Everything has to have a timestamp. It works by timestamps. And it also pulls out host, source, and source type on everything. It needs those. The host is the computer it came from. The source is the source file or whatever else it came from. And the source type is essential because that tells Splunk how to parse the data. That tells it what name value pairs to hunt for in there. So it needs that just to put it in the index. What's going on here is the same thing Google does. It is indexing unstructured data, only you're seeing much more of what happens than you do at Google. And so as we did last time, when you import data, you have to tell it what kind of data it is, and then it tells you what it's going to extract, and you decide whether to like it or not. And it is essential that it does that. Splunk does not take completely unstructured data, although you can bring it in. That's not designed for that. Yeah. Source is usually the file it came from. And you see that here, source is offload mail security. Yeah, some kind of name for the source. Not everything is a file, but it's a name to identify the source. In case, like you might have like a Windows log, but you might have 10 Windows servers. So you'll have something like host or source to specify which Windows server. It's just a label you assign when you bring it in. So, so the results appear here. One thing always to remember is the time range picker. That's going to irritate you greatly here. The time range picker always defaults to the last 24 hours, but all the projects we're doing here are using old archived data, so it's all like a couple of years old. So nothing will ever work unless you keep adjusting the time to all the time, which is not recommended because, of course, it makes searches slower, but it's what we have to do for the projects here. So if you're getting no results, the first thing you check is the time range. Once you've got a time range that has events, you get a green graph here that shows you a bar chart of the events, so you can see them. And here you get the field sidebar, which you're going to play with quite a bit later. These fields are really quite helpful. You can click on them and see what values are present and sort by and filter by them. It chooses selected fields right away, which are fields that it's currently indexing by. Interesting fields are fields that appear in at least 20% of the events and therefore might be of value to help drill down into whatever you're searching for. And you can also add any other events you want. They show up at the bottom. And the number you see next to events is how many different values there are. So here I have 1,900 events from 4 different hosts, but they're all of the same type. And they're all from the same app and they're all from the same action, but they have 20 different hour values, which is potentially interesting. They don't have 24-hour values. So apparently, as you can see, there is a certain peak in this activity during the day, and apparently some of these hours have 0 events, which the bar chart looks like. So there are only 20 different hours available. So you can mouse over to search results in the event, and it will highlight the words so you can then do more. So this is something you can also do in Wireshark. If you've seen it, you can go to an individual event at the bottom, find like a field in it, right-click it, and put it up there to filter by it. And they have the same thing here. So I could go down here and find this word password and decide I want to do something. There's mail serve. I could hover over that, and I could do things like add that to the search so I'll only see events that have mail serve in them, exclude it from the search so I don't see any more events like that, and so on, which is pretty handy as you drill through events to try to get down to interesting things. And you can change view options. If you have something like this bar chart, and you have a bunch of events, and you decide you want to change the time range, you can zoom in by just clicking and dragging across the bar chart. It'll zoom into just the part you selected. And if you do that, it's fast because it does not redo the search, because all it's doing is throwing away some of the data. And it doesn't need to redo the search to do that. Now, if you zoom out, it has to do a new search because it has to get a new bunch of data that it didn't have before. Anyway, that's I say you can actually have all sorts of times, like from 10 minutes ago to 3 days ago if you want to. Most of the time, it's good enough to just choose these presets, you know, last 24 hours, all time, last 7 days. But if you want to, you can totally specify a range in the GUI or by just putting the command line, typing in commands to specify the time. And those are here. You can just refer to seconds, days, weeks, months, hours, the typical abbreviations. The one thing that's a little screwy is if you put minus 30 minutes, that's 30 minutes before right now. But if you put minus 30 at minute, not 30 minutes at, then it will round it down. And the minutes at hours will round it down to the nearest hour. So if it's 2:47, it'll go back to 2 o'clock. 30 minutes back and then round down to the even hour, in case you care. All right. You do need to know that for the cert exam. And maybe there's a use for that. I haven't ever needed that yet, but it could happen. So here's what you have. You could be minus H would take you back 1 hour. Minus 2Ds would take you back 2 days and then round down to the start of that day and then go till the beginning of today. So that's the game here. Here you can also just specify exact times down to the second of the earliest time. One thing that I find often recommended is to put earliest equals 0, but when I tried, it doesn't seem to work. So I don't know. I thought earliest equals 0 would be easier than putting the time range checker to all time, but it's not working too well. We'll try it live in a couple of minutes here. Anyway, so there's the timeline. You can hover over a column. It'll show you the number of events in that range. So let's go to a live one, because this is kind of dry that way. I've got Opera connected to my server. Okay, so what I did was I put up a server at splunk.samsclass.info. This one is another URL for the same thing, which I used while I was struggling with it. There, splunk.samsclass.info is all you need. This actually took me about 2 days to get going. There were a lot of problems, which you will not have. Soon I'll write a project so you can make your own Splunk server doing all this stuff if you like, which you might want to when you see the defects of mine. But in the meantime, you can all use mine for the extra credit projects. So you go here and you can log in. I sent you an email, I think earlier today. All of you have accounts on this server if you're officially enrolled in the class with your City College email name, the part before mail.tcsf.edu, and the password of ChangeMe. But if you don't have an account, you can just use student one, and the password is student one. Although if somebody changes it, then you'll be locked out and let me know. But anyway, once you've got that, then you can get into this thing. And the fun part about this thing is this has the boss of the SOC data already in it, which is the contest we did about a year ago. They open sourced the data. You can download it. They open sourced the instructions. What they did not open source was the questions and answers, but I asked for them and they gave it to me. However, I'm not really using all their questions and answers yet. We're going to have a whole series of projects using this. I just did the first 4 for today to get you started, because when I did the 2 competitions, I did Boss of the SOC and Boss of the NOC, and I noticed that it was very frustrating. The training I'd taken did not really prepare me to really work on a real machine, and I want to do better in this class. So I mean, if you do the online stuff, like those slides I was doing, that's enough to pass the test. That is not really enough to get anywhere when you're trying to find real threats on a real system, it turns out. The first thing is, if you go to Search and Report, where you do everything, I liked this. And they kept, oh, just start typing index equals something here. And I said, why did I do that? First, I want to see what happens. So I can see how many total events there are down here. Now, the problem is there's almost no data, 238 events. That's because this is index equals main. That's the default. And by the way, I tried to change it, but it didn't seem to take. Anyway, so this is, all those events is the events that the Splunk live capture utility grabbed before I could turn it off. They wanted me to turn in Splunk Stream, which I did, and Splunk Stream is used to understand captured streams from the past, but it's also used to capture immediate streams, and when you install it, it immediately starts doing that. And then I turned it off, but in the meantime, it caught 238 events. So these are really boring events. These are just my SSH packets trying to control my server. The real events are in another index, but you can find it here by typing index, and it will now offer you good choices like index equal bot SV1, which is what I want. So it also adding a go star that I don't need there. This is the actual index, boss of the SOC version 1. That's the data that, and this data, when I went to the contest, the guys that made it were there talking about this. They got a team from Splunk together. A few guys, they made a whole bunch of Amazon virtual machines. They put on a web server and they got a 48 firewall and all the good stuff, and they ran it, and then they attacked it. Had a bunch of real customers simulated, and then they had a bunch of attacks. They captured all that, and that's what you're using for data here. So this finds nothing because it's only looking at the last 24 hours. If you go to all time and search now, then notice a lot of events. The timeline keeps updating, and notice that it is very, very slow. You will discover why Splunk is always whining about how to make your searches faster. If you make a sloppy search like this, it really bogs everything down. It's going to take it about 2 minutes to finish here. Now, this is the first irritating thing. Now, all I wanted to do was get a general idea what the data was like. I really don't want to wait 2 minutes to find every event. And I discovered something that nobody told me at Splunk at all, which is sampling, which is apparently the solution to this. And that's what we're going to use in the projects. Otherwise, you couldn't have 40 students sharing this server. In fact, even one person on the server would be very frustrated. And by the way, there's a full data set that's 6 gigabytes, and this is the abbreviated data set that contains only the evil traffic to make it smaller and faster. And that takes the search for everything from 10 minutes down to 2 minutes. So it goes from being completely intolerable down to just being very annoying. But this totally fixes it. 1 in 100. This means only show me one event out of every 100 events. This is, and now it finishes in like 5 seconds. This is more like it. Because now, of course, if you're really searching for a specific event, you might not find it this way. But if you're just trying to get a general idea what's going on, you can start this way. So now it's done. There are only 9,000 events, which means the abbreviated data set is almost 1 million events from Splunk. The big one is even bigger. So I got 9,000 events. Here's the timeline. They go from August 25 of 2016 to August, looks like 24. What is this, August? Oh, August 9. This is August 10 to August 25. Okay, it looks like just 2 specific events occur here. Anyway, so here's the events. So the first thing I do is look down here for an event. Here's something, the event comes from schemas.microsoft events, some kind of provider. This is Windows Sysmon. We're going to talk more about that later. Sysmon is a internals tool you add to Microsoft to monitor it, and typically tied to Splunk is one of the things you do with it. So that's what a big event looks like. Remember, this is a big, long, unstructured thing, and then at the bottom are the things that are root: host, source, and source type. The source type tells it how to parse it, and there's a special source type for Sysmon data. The source here isn't just another label of the source, and here's the host, the specific machine it came from. So there's many, many machines, page after page of events, at 20 per page, up to 900 events here, 9,000 events. So let's start over here. Here, I got host, source, and source type. Source type, it turns out, is the most useful. Host will give me host names of computers, which would only be useful if I had like a network diagram in front of me and I knew which computer I wanted to worry about, but I don't. It turns out the coolest place to start is source type. Source type gives you immediately useful information. It tells you what kind of data you're looking at. And this is extremely useful, right? This is Sysmon data. Now, Sysmon is measuring things about the Windows system, like disk usage and files opened and network connections and stuff. So that's general network logs from Microsoft system logs. Stream data is captured packets. That's what Splunk does. It sniffs the network just like Wireshark or TCP dump, and it sorts them into general buckets like SMB for server message block, IP, TCP, HTTP. That's what those are. Those are raw packet captures, although Splunk does not store the full packet captures like Wireshark would. It stores metadata, summarizing what was in there to try to make it more indexable and smaller. And then you have Suricata. Suricata is a popular intrusion detection system. And someone asked this in the last lecture. Can you run a real intrusion detection system in addition to Splunk? And I say, yes, you typically do. You run commercial products like a Carbon Black or McAfee antivirus or whatever you've got, and you take all these things that are also scanning for bad events, and they send their event logs up to Splunk so you can search them. So all your security devices are going to be found here. Here's FGT, UTM, and traffic. Those are FortiGate firewalls. Your FortiGate firewall is running, it is finding things and sending it up to Splunk. So that's why this is probably where you would go. And here's, by the way, the typical Windows event log, which is Microsoft's built-in event, which can also be forwarding it here, which is different than Sysmon. Sysmon is a more detailed tool that can monitor more system events than what goes in the normal event log that gets forwarded. And you can also monitor the red registry, which I think you do with syslog, but I'm not quite sure how this was obtained. But anyway, it's from Windows events. So let's see if I got a chat message coming in. Would any of these categories contain possible port information? Very good. Okay, and here's another one I saw before. I got a notification that your free trial will end soon. If your free trial ends, Splunk says you can convert your license to a free license. I couldn't figure out how to do that, so what I did was just uninstall it, reinstall it again to get another 60 days. That worked. So that's the sleazy answer. If you Google, you will find complicated instructions how to convert to a free version, and I found that too much bother. But that's what I would do. By the way, in 60 days, this cloud server is going to quit too. And I figure I'll just reinstall it, or maybe I can restore it from an image. I don't know. Anyway, right, and so we wanted to know if there's port information. So let's take a look at it. If I look at stream HTTP, for example, then I will be looking at the raw HTTP data, and this is really quite interesting. So there's only 223 events, although remember, I'm only seeing 1% of them to make things faster. And I can see what kind of data is in a stream HTTP. If this was Wireshark, I would have the full packet, and then it would show me all the fields in an HTTP request. And in a separate packet, it would show me the reply. And if it was a typical request, the request would be 20 lines of data. The reply would be 30 packets adding up to a whole image and page or something. And it would have to somehow put that all together. This is why Splunk doesn't store raw packet data. It stores metadata. It chewed the whole thing up and made it into one text-based log. And here's what it did. It summarized it this way: bytes in, bytes out, client IP, that's the IP that requested the HTTP. It has the whole destination headers. These are the reply, 304 not modified. Then it has the request is here, get, code signature.crl, HTTP. It has the source headers. So you have the headers in the request and the headers in the reply. And if you've got like HTML, you'll see that here. So it took the entire stream. And if you want to know it had port numbers in it, it does. Here's source port, and destination port I think is in here too. Yep, so it took the ports from the packets and perhaps from the handshake before it, and the request and the reply, combined it all and took the meat out of it and indexed it all. It's really very nice. And it's amazing to me when you see what it's doing that it can do this as fast as it can. And not surprising that it gets slow if you write a sloppy search. But all that is one event, and I have 9,000 of them. All right, got more questions? Okay, would any of these categories be ported from? Yeah, it is very nice. Yeah, that's why you get a lot. Splunk is very smart at choosing the important stuff and making it easy to find it. That is the whole point of it. That if you have some question like, did someone get infected by ransomware? And if they did, who else got infected afterwards? Splunk makes it relatively easy to find that, which is to say, it's still quite a bit of work, and practice helps a lot, but it's possible. Whereas if you just had, 50 text files scrolling by and grep, you would never get there. So that's the point. So, all right, so that's source type. Now, if I wanted to narrow this down, let me go back to my slides and see if I have anything else I should mark out. So let's try the time range. So if I go to the top here, I've got a time range like that. It looks like it's all happening on one day, and I seem to be on a multi-day time range. So I should be able to zoom in. I can zoom to selection. If I click on this, it tells me there's 221 events that day. If I double click, it's going to zoom in to just that day. Now I can see, here's the ones at 2 p.m. and the ones at 3 p.m. So I can zoom in by double clicking to 3 p.m. Now I can see them minute by minute. So if I wanted to know what that peak was, I could click and drag over those. And now, I guess double click. Anyway, I can zoom in as you want. And this is cheap to zoom in because it doesn't have to repeat the search. It's just letting me see a finer grid on the events that are there. And I can get right down to individual events if I want to. So here's one event, and if I click on it, 3:15:34, it appears right here. So there's that one event at 3:15:34. So if I had some reason to suspect one in the graph, like a sudden peak of activity, I could do that. Anyway, that's why everybody pays a pile of money for Splunk. It really does make a lot of this easier. So we talked about this. You can zoom in on parts of it. You can also change other things here. All right, now here's something that turns out to be very annoying. Every job is saved. And the main consequence of this that I've noticed is a default install of Splunk. After you do about 10 searches, it stops working and says you've exceeded your search quota, which is very annoying. And I couldn't find any clear explanation anywhere of how to fix it. So I turned everybody's search quota up by another factor of 10. So it's entirely possible, perhaps even likely, that if all of you try to use this thing at once, it will just freeze up totally and die. So let me know if that happens. That's why my next priority is writing a project where you learn how to make your own local server with all this data. So, because you may well want to make your own rather than all compete to use mine. But I think if we keep filtering by 1 to 100, we can all share one, but we're going to find out the hard way how bad it gets. You could also try working at 2 in the morning or a week after the lecture or something. Anyway, so the searches are being saved, which are here. There's a jobs menu someplace, which I am not seeing. Here, jobs. Use the job bar. Where is the job bar? There's the job bar. Okay. So this search is sampling. Okay. If I inspect job, that shows me this one job, and it tells me about execution costs and stuff, which is pretty interesting. There should be a way to see all the jobs. That's what I've seen before, but now I'm somehow not finding it. Where is it? Where is it? Go to the top. Activity? Ah, thank you. Good. Because this is what I wanted to show you. Yeah, everything I'm doing is remembered for 10 minutes. And it is ruthless. A few of these seems to hit up their whole quota, and there's nothing you can do except wait for 10 minutes. They say you can delete them, but when you delete them, it doesn't let you make any more. So I don't know what the point of it was. I find it very annoying, so I just turned the quota up higher, or I couldn't even do these few searches in lecture without hitting the limit. All right, and there was another chat coming up, if I can figure out how to make it pop onto the screen. There, activity, jobs. Yeah, good, someone else found it. Good, thank you. All right, so anyway, so there's the jobs. You can in principle queue them. If you get too many of them, it will say jobs are queued. And when you go here, it will show them all done and a bunch queued, not moving, because it's waiting for the 10 minutes to run out. So that's pretty annoying. One thing though is it is by user. That's why I made 40 users. So that if you freeze up your jobs for 10 minutes, it hopefully won't freeze up anybody else's jobs for 10 minutes. And the server has a lot of room. I have like 80 gigs on the server, and all this is only 15 gigs of it. So I really don't think it's running out of room. I think it just has some default settings that are excessively limited. Anyway, that's the game. Jobs are good for 10 minutes by default, which I suppose is because they figure you're going to go back and repeat that search, and it doesn't want to have to do it again. I'm not sure. You can share a job with somebody else. At a big company, you would do a search to find something, then pass it to the next level of tech support or your manager or something. And rather than having to run the query again, they can view it. Anyway, so you can extend it to 7 days. If you want to preserve something longer than that, you have to make a report. Your only choices are 10 minutes and 7 days, as you can see. So it's pretty ruthless, especially since it's going to freeze you up for having too many jobs. I would prefer to have more options here. Like I would like to turn on something to make them not saved at all expire in 1 second, so it keeps moving, but I couldn't find that option. It might be there somewhere. There are configuration files all through this. There are configuration files for everything. It's very much like Apache. There's configuration files all over the place, overriding each other's data and an order in which you're supposed to put them in. So I managed to foul it up and break it and fix it and turn on stuff, and only about half the stuff I turned on worked. It's pretty confusing. But anyway, I did manage to get it working, and I'll have a project where you can do it if you want to for extra credit. But configuring this stuff is beyond this course. It's beyond this official Splunk cert. But I think it's useful information. So you can share these search jobs so other people can see them. All right, and you can export them, of course. It's just like any enterprise class product, you can make beautiful PDFs and things to import into other products so that you can put them in, management summaries and promotional materials and all that jazz. That's what you pay the money for enterprise class stuff. It can look beautiful enough to show to top executives. This is the big thing. Now that I'm teaching at Black Hat, I've been talking to Liz, I'm going to have to put a lot of work into beautifying my stuff because all my stuff is just a bunch of sloppy web pages and it has to look beautiful for the top executives. Presentation matters a lot, like a restaurant. Can't just give you a bowl of slop. You got to make it beautiful. So, all right. You guys, however, get the bowl of slop. Anyway, so anyway, so you can do your save jobs here, like I say, you can repeat them. And your search history, by the way, is also being retained all the time. You can see that at the bottom of your Splunk window, everything you're doing is in the search history. I'm going to go back here to my search and reporting.
So the job doesn't last, it only lasts for a while between.
Job lasts 10 minutes, but you have a search history just like your browser history. And this, I don't think, stores the results. It just stores what you've been doing. This seems to go a long ways back. I think for the same reason, if you have browser history, you can say, I saw it yesterday. What did I do? You can go look here. This seems to go way back. I suppose there is some limit, but this seems to go all the way back to 10 hours ago, which is when I installed this box. So as far as I can tell, it's big. I don't know what the limit is. All right. All right, so then we talk about fields. So fields are what you search by. And let's see, I got another chat coming in. Are admins able to see users' history? I haven't tested it, but I think so. By the way, I should mention something about administrators. Your administrator user can create users, set the quotas, restart the server, and all that jazz. You can also just be an administrator on the Linux host or Windows host, and you can control everything from the command line there. And if you are the administrator over the host, you can do things from command line, but if you try to do things that affect the data in Splunk, it will force you to also log in with the Splunk administrator, which makes sense, of course, because you might be the server administrator, but not the Splunk administrator. And by the way, I said in the last lecture that you can't delete data, and of course there must be some way, and I found it today because I had to do it several times. I imported the data, it was wrong. I imported it again, it was too slow. Many times I had to wipe out the data. There is a Splunk delete index command. It makes you verify it, and then it cleans it completely off the disk. So it's there, but it's not anywhere in the GUI, as far as I can tell. They want to make it difficult, but of course, you often need that. So I think administrators can do anything. And the reason I brought that up when you asked this question, can you see other people's history? I don't know if you can do that in the GUI, but everything is just stored in a text file on the server. So if you are the local root account on the server, I'm sure you can find that file. So, of course, I don't think anything's really hidden. And as you might imagine, with almost like everything else that's Linux oriented, there's a GUI, which is very limited, and all the pros never touch it. They just use the command line, mess with the config files, copy things around. That's why, but for like the first day or two, when I was trying to set up this thing, there's a giant zip file full of data. I would try to unzip it and import it, and it would go in there, but it wouldn't have any of the different fields parsed out. It would all just be flat files of data. And then I realized it's pre-indexed. I remember them saying something about this at the event. This stuff is pre-indexed. It'll save you a lot of time, but they didn't tell you anywhere how to import it. You have to put it where the data is supposed to go, not passing it through the indexer, just putting it there so it will find it all ready to go. And I had to find blogs and piece together pieces to get that going. Anyway, all right. And the issue where this comes up in the real world is if you have a Splunk server, sometimes you want to export the data from the server and put it on another one. Like, for example, your network is getting bigger and you're switching to a big cluster or something, or you're upgrading the hardware. So there are ways to export the data from this server and import it into this one. There are fast ways and slow ways and various ways to do that. All right, so let's talk about some search terms. So if I go back to here and I search for that index again, index equal bots1, we'll click the stream again and set it to all time and set it to samples so I don't have to wait forever and run that. And now I saw another chat message come in. Okay, is there an easy way to move data from one index to another? It is pretty easy if you go into the command line. The indexes are just in folders, and you can rename the folder, and then you go to a configuration file and specify the name of the new. So that's actually what I eventually ended up doing. It is pretty easy, but there is not in the GUI. Yeah?
And is there a way to get the data summary to show different indexes? Because it just seems weird that the way you showed it originally in your sample, that it would only show the main index?
As far as I know, there is supposed to be a way to change the default index, and I tried it, it didn't work. There's probably some way to list the available indexes, but I couldn't find it. I think I saw it at one of these events. I think I saw someone demonstrate it. There is some way to do it, but I don't know it. And by the way, just to be fair, again, like every kind of Linux-oriented product, you can totally write your own scripts and your own extensions and everything. So I'm sure you can do it. Like, for example, I had to add 45 students to this. So I saw, can you import a CSV? And so when I asked this question, and then after a few hours, he answered, he said, well, nobody knew the answer. So here's how you write the script. Just Splunk, add user, and then I just made 45 of those or put it in a loop, right, in Python or something. But you can just write anything you want, which is pretty easy too, if you know a little scripting. And that's the thing. Even this expensive enterprise class product, it's not polished the way like a Microsoft product is, where you have this GUI and you don't even see the source code. It's open source stuff. So the answer to anything complicated is just write it yourself and then submit it to the forum. And then it will be added to the user supplied add-ons, just like Firefox. Everybody's contributing more stuff to Splunk. Anyway, which is kind of exciting as long as you're somewhat of a programmer, and can be kind of frustrating if you're very much, you know, a non-technical person that just wants something to be pretty and just work. But Splunk is closer to that than any other product that I'm aware of in the SIEM space. But it does seem to be the leader, although there are some competitors. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about how to search for things. So if I search for source type equals stream HTTP, I have 255 events. And if I go down here, I can see, for example, that there are actions. There are two actions, allowed and blocked. So maybe I want to see just the blocked ones. Now notice, by the way, there are 255 events, of which 90 are allowed and 33 are blocked. Now, you might be upset at the way this doesn't add up. And of course, the reason it doesn't add up is a whole bunch of events don't have either allowed or blocked. They don't have that field. Remember, you're not searching through structured data. You're searching through just a pile of data that's not all the same. So some of it has this field and some of it doesn't. So the first thing I might want to do is worry about whether that field exists. Events with this field, it's only 48% of the events have that field. So if I put this in, it's going to put in action equals star. Now, if you are like a logic thinker, you might think that star should match null, but it doesn't. Action equals star means it has an action field that can have any value. If it doesn't have the field, it's not here, so the 129 is gone. So here's some stuff to give you a headache. If action is not equal to star, then you get 0 events. Now that's because it has to have an action field and have no value. This is contradictory. So let's go back to action equals star. So how about this one? Not action equals star. Now I have 126 events like that. So this is like the kind of thing to give you a headache. The action, but it does make sense. Action equals star is a Boolean, which is true if you have an action field. So the ones that don't have an action field satisfy this condition. So that's the way it works. Now I could do not. Now let's go back and see what actions are available. If I go back to the one that has actions, and I look at the value, check allowed and blocked, I can click on this and it will find the ones that are allowed. And it left the action equals star there, which seems unnecessarily redundant. I'm going to take that away. So here's the ones that are allowed. There are 74 of them. Here's the ones that are not allowed. And there are 29 of them because those are ones that have the action field, but it doesn't have this value. And then, of course, I could do this. And now I've got a double negative and I can sort of get a headache. But now I'm getting 200. I got the ones with no action field and the ones with a certain value. And you see how it goes. By the way, if you notice, there are multiple conditions. I got an index, a source type, and something about the action. If you don't put and or, it assumes and, which is common. I think Google's the same. Everything has to be there. Anyway, that's the point. These are and. If you want or, then I could put or here. It has to be capitals, by the way. More about that in a minute. Now I should get more 5,000 events. Now I'm getting a ton of events, So everything, either because I'm now getting more than even the stream HTTP, anything that's stream HTTP or something that has an action field that's not equal to this value. Anyway, or doesn't have an action field equal to that value. So this is the game. You can combine things like this. One thing that I found very annoying, these have to be capital letters for or and not. They turn orange to remind you. The field names are case sensitive. The field names are not case sensitive. The field values are, oh crap, I got it. Field names are case sensitive and the values aren't, right? Thank you. Because it's not like Microsoft. In Linux, everything is case sensitive. In Microsoft, nothing is case sensitive. And here it's all mixed up. Another thing that really annoys me is that the quotes are just optional. There's no quotes around allowed there. And if I put the quotes around it, it doesn't change anything. And if I use the wizard to fill it in, half the time it puts in quotes and the other half of the time it doesn't, just to keep me guessing. So anyway, that's life. You get sort of used to it. But anyway, so it's the field names are case sensitive, the field values are not. Thank you, good. By the way, if I'm getting anything wrong, don't be shy about correcting me. I'd like to try and say it right.
Just print screen it.
Well, yeah, it's on the slides too, but you do have to know it. And anyway, that's the game. All right, so you can have field discovery. It'll automatically find a bunch of stuff like we saw. It will try to find anything it can. These are meta fields, host, source type, and index. Those are fields that did not come from the actual event. The data that came from Sysmon didn't have it. It deduced those. Those were defined by the administrator when they imported the data. They told it what host this is from, what source type label to put on it. Then it finds time and raw. These underscore things are internally generated fields. And by the way, here's something fun. When I was setting up Splunk, I must have set it up about a dozen times by now. I would often have problems with my Splunk. I actually went and Googled, where are the Splunk logs? Then I felt like an idiot. They just search in Splunk for the Splunk logs. If the type is, I think, underscore Splunk, you'll see the Splunk logs. Anyway, and you'll see the installation and the error logs and everything. I said, why did I Google and hunt through the Linux file system to find the error logs in Splunk? This is like failure to comprehend the situation. Of course, they're in Splunk. Anyway, so, all right, then you have data-specific fields. Like some things are obviously there. Like here you have a 200 in an HTTP response. So that's something you'd want to index. And if you have correctly given it the right source type that should have been indexed, you can make a custom parsing later if you want to. But usually that's done when you import data. And usually for most of us, it's done automatically because we're importing data from a common known source, like a Windows event log or a FortiGate firewall. And we're not inventing our own parsing. We're using the standard parsing for that type of data. Splunk data is not as crazy as Google. You don't have an infinite number of different types of data. You really just have common event logs and from various common devices. Probably you don't have anything you custom wrote that you're feeding in. Although if you write some kind of custom application, your own script, then you're going to have to write a custom parser, of course. All right, so interesting fields are the ones that occur at least 20% of the events, and you can go to all fields to see them all. You see the selected fields appear down here at the bottom separately. The other fields are not separated in the events, but they're there. And you can choose to select them. So let's do that. Here I am with my mess here. I'm going to clean this up and go back to just source type stream equals HTTP so I don't get a headache. So now I have 263 events in the HTTP stream. So I can go down here and if I go to accept, this is the part of the header that tells it what you will accept. Now that's kind of boring. Let's see what else might be fun. RTT packets. That's some kind of number, round trip packets per event. That's not extremely CS version. That's pretty boring. What else is not boring down here? Duplicate packets. Yeah. Comment. What the heck is an HTTP? Oh, this thing. Oh. Well, that's kind of interesting. How about refer? Oh, there you go. These are the sources of things. That's kind of fun. So most of them are coming from I'm Really Not Batman. The company is serving up a web page called I'm Really Not Batman on port 80. And you're going to be watching the traffic going to that server. That's what most of it is. And there's apparently a Joomla server involved too. Let's see what else we might have that's fun down here. Punct is something I should mention. Punct just takes the punctuation marks out of the data. Now, this might seem stupid, but of course, if you do web security, you know what's going on. You're looking for SQL injection, directory traversal. A bunch of attacks involve squeezing punctuation in there. So this is actually pretty handy to just have a list of all the punctuation marks to see, because you can tell like this looks like a directory traversal maybe. Anyway, we'll play with that in the project. And you got source port, you got 2 MAC addresses. It's kind of fun. So anyway, I was looking for host or something down here. Anyway, so if I choose something like this action, which was either allowed or blocked, down here it's available, but it's not selected. I can select it here. Now it's selected, action. Now it's going to appear down here at the end of every event. There, source type equals action equals blocked. And another thing I didn't do, which we could do, is if I found something down here, like I wanted to find the ones that had this in image equal GIF, I could highlight it, and now it's going to offer, there, if I click on this, it's going to offer to add to the search. But it's not going to let me choose part of the field. It's going to force me to choose this entire thing. But I could take like English, and I could add that to the search. That would give me 11, or I could exclude it, and then I would have 7. So that's the other stuff we've talked about. Now this is an action. If I want to use a field that is not interesting, which means it's not in 20% of the events, I can just go down here and see the other fields. These are the ones that are rare, see only a few times, and I can go down here and look at them. And I can define a new field down here, where I specify a delimiter or regular expression to pick something else out of the data. That, of course, tends to create a mess unless you're very careful if you have multiple data mixed in. Anyway, those are fun things to try. That's how you make a field selected. And we talked about this already. You click a field and add it up to the selected list. By the way, one thing I didn't point out, but I could have, you look at location, this I found pretty annoying at first. So let me show you something. This is something that frustrated me a lot about Splunk. My job mainly in this course is hopefully you have a better experience than I did. I would search for something like this, location. I see the top 10 values. I say, well, this is interesting. I would like to see them all. Where's the thing that shows me all the values? It's not there. You can see the top 10. You can see the bottom 10, the rare values. And here's what you do. Let me go back to what I had. I was looking at location, I think. Something with a large number. L is for location. There. So this is something with 93 values. Now, what you do, which I find to be very handy, is you click rare values, and then you look at what it did. And this is actually coming up in a later chapter. This filtered it to rare, limit equals 20. The two choices are rare and top. So you can look at top, for example, and then you'll see the top 20. And now it's pretty obvious. All I have to do is make this number bigger. This will give me the top 200. There are only 93. Now I see them all. And the Splunk people think this is obvious enough that they don't have to give you a button there to see them all. But for me, it would have really helped if they had that button there. But this is how you do it. If you're seeing things, you want to see them all, there they all are. And you have the count of them over here in decreasing. So here's the ones with 5, 2, 2, and 1. Here's the percent. So there's the list of them all. So we'll get to this later. I don't think the aggregates have come up yet. They're coming in the next chapter or the chapter after. There's a whole bunch of aggregation where you do a summary of data. Of course, that's very important. And this is the top is the simplest one. All right. Anyway, so I thought I'd mention that as things that frustrated me. And hopefully,
that search?
What's that?
Could you save that search? Like,
oh, yes. You could, and then keep rerunning it.
Yeah.
But you can only save it for 10 days.
oh,
If you want it to save longer and use it forever, then you make a report, and those you can save forever. And the reports can have a live search in them. So that's what you would do if this is something you want. You could also put it in a dashboard, and then you could have employees that just look at their dashboard, and this is just there for them all the time, which is what Homer Simpson does. Homer Simpson is looking at Splunk or something like it, showing him a dashboard of stuff, and hopefully with a carefully made dashboard popping up the events that are interesting. And this is the beginning job at an incident response. I had a student ask me about this. They was asking me about to get a job in incident response. And I said, in fact, the beginning job at IR is not hard to get. It's not considered very good. Those are what Homer Simpson does. There are people that sit in the room and they watch these alerts go by, and they're just watching for like the 10 most common important alerts, and they know what to do for those 10 things. And anything not on that list, they forward to a second level. This is like tech support. The guy that answers the phone that just has like the top, did you restart it? Let me change your password. Do you have the right version? That kind of thing. They're just doing solving 90% of the problems with the usual common things. And people usually only do that job for about 6 months before they either get promoted or quit. But that is how you get started. Then you get used to this. And you're using a dashboard that the Splunk administrator made that brings up what he thinks is important, or she, and you're just now able to quickly zero in on whatever the standard things are, and hopefully have some kind of exception and some way of forwarding the exceptions to the next level, which is where you want to go. The next level up is the second level incident response person who is smart enough to handle an unusual thing. And the next level up is the threat hunters that do not work from alerts. They go out on the network and find trouble that hasn't triggered an alert yet. And you have to be very experienced then to do that. And those are the steps up in the eliteness of incident response. Anyway, you've got, by the way, of course, Splunk is designed for network traffic. It totally understands IP addresses, CIDR addresses, ranges of addresses with stars in them. You can use wildcards anywhere. You can use greater than, less than for source ports, and not equal. Of course, what you would expect. It's designed for network traffic, so it understands that sort of thing. We talked about the difference between bang and not. Bang means the greater than or equal or less than is the opposite, but not means this didn't happen, including that field doesn't exist. All right. And now we talked about that. It can be a little confusing. There are 3 modes. Fast supposedly is faster and simpler. Verbose supposedly tells you more. Smart is the default that goes back and forth. In the response to the SOC competition, they said, oh, be sure and change your searches to verbose, and I couldn't notice any difference. I don't really see what the point of it is. It seems about the same. Let's play with it here. This is smart mode. So here's my dump of the top 20. Let's go back to just seeing everything, so it's a more complicated result. Here's all the 236 HTTP requests. This is smart mode. If I go to fast mode, then I guess it didn't bother to show me. I don't know. I'm not sure I see what the difference was. Let's try verbose and see if we can spot the difference. All events and field data. Okay, it filled in this instead of making me click a button to see them. And oh yeah, it gave me this whole long mess. Okay, that is verbose. Fast just seems to have picked off the top 3, but this still seems just as detailed to me. So I guess the only difference I notice is over here. In practice, I didn't find any difference in the value of these modes. Yeah.
When you have that top search, that's
This one here?
if you have that with the top limit equals 200, that one.
Yeah.
If you have that kind of search in and you leave it at.
Well, let's try it.
And you leave it at smart, then it won't give you the events detail. You can only.
Well, good idea. Let's try it. Okay, so top, I put in a pipe, and then top limit equals 100. And what is this, count or something?
Location.
Location, thank you. Good, count. Okay, let's try that. So this is fast, and here I get the name and the count.
But it won't give you the event detail.
Oh, of course, I don't think you ever see the event. Let's try the verbose. So you can't show the events in accumulation.
Click on the events tab.
There's an events tab.
Upper left.
Middle.
Oh, here. Oh. Well, sure, but I think they're always there.
No, not if you did smart.
Oh. Well, let's try smart. I'm catching on. No, there's there.
No.
There's events.
No, click it.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Why, thank you. Good. Okay. That's a reason. Okay, so a reason to make statistics faster without generating this as well. That does make some sense. Why, thank you. I appreciate the help. All right. Good. All right. And that's enough of that. So let's see what time it is. Just up to an hour. I think I'm just going to demonstrate the first project and let you go, because I don't think it's going to take long. So you've done hopefully you're moving ahead with the usual quizzes and the modules that come from Splunk where you practice these things with their simple data. But if you want to move on to this stuff, I put it down here as extra credit. And this is the first of several. And so let me just show you how this works. And I thought this is awesome. This is trying to make what happened when I really did the competition more fun for you. So here's the idea. Connect to the Splunk server. It's just right there. Log in with any account you want, like student one, or your personal account, which will be the same unless people start maxing it out and freezing up the server for certain accounts, which I would imagine will probably happen tonight, and probably less in the coming days as people stagger all over the place. But if you get very frustrated, just wait a few days and I'll have the instructions to make your own local server that nobody else will be sharing with you. Anyway, the point is index equal bots v1 will show you everything, but if you should use the 1 to 100 sampling like I did to avoid making it take forever and hog up the thing. So you see the source events. Here's an explanation of source events that we already went through, so you know what's going on with them. And here's the HTTP streams. So all you do is go through this. Now, if we want to search for this event, I'm really not Batman. That is the name of the server. So with source type, let's go back to the Splunk server. I got my source type equals stream. And now I want to add more data, more searches. I can type I'm, and it will offer, I'm not Batman. It's offering things it found in the data, like I'm not Batman.jpg, but I'm really there. Now it figured out there's a string in the data called I'm really not Batman, and here's I'm really not Batman.com. So I'll settle for this one. And when I do that, and now search, now I'm down to, I have 236 events, and I can now look at these events. Now, if I look at them, I can just search through these events. Now remember, we are not seeing real ordinary network traffic. We're seeing only the evil traffic because I did it to make this the server faster. So all the traffic you see here is messed up traffic. Be aware that on a real server, of course, 99% of it will be good traffic, and the bad traffic will be a needle in a haystack. So if you look down here, you can see this request. Here's a cookie value. That looks okay. Here's content type. Here's move permanently. That's what they got. This document has been moved to another location. I said, well, that's a little screwy, but maybe it's harmless. Whoa, neat. I zoomed in too much somehow. All right. Anyway, I'd like that to go away. Hide fields. Yes, hide them. Thank you. All right. Zoom out a little more. Somehow I've hit some goofy mode. All right. All right. Let me try and zoom in some reasonable amount. Okay. All right. So down here I have the destination IP, and up here I have the client IP, which ends in 42. The destination IP ends in 70. That is probably the web server itself. Probably the client is the customer viewing it. This is the server, unless there's some other layer of like distributor that distributes a load balancer or something involved. Here's form data. Here's user agent, looks relatively normal. Here is the actual search word, the ordering search phrase. Okay, everything looks okay so far. When I get down here and I look at the post, it's down here. But if I keep going, I will eventually find some obvious attack traffic. And here I am not seeing it. Did I do something wrong? I'm really not Batman. 236, 215. Neat. I don't know how it can be different than it was before. Maybe the sampling. Oh, sampling 1 in 100 is probably random. Anyway, if you keep looking down here, you'll find some attack traffic. And here's URL encoded. What's that?
The red one, PD scanner.
The red one?
Scroll up a little bit.
You saw something?
Scroll down. Scroll down a little bit.
You saw something? There should be something. Oh, here. Yeah, here you're seeing the name of a scanner. This is a phone scanner running. And most of the traffic is from the phone scanner. The bad guy ran this automated scanner, and it's sending thousands and thousands of malformed requests. And when I did it, when preparing the project, the first one had an obvious directory traversal. All these requests are malicious. Some of them are obvious and some of them aren't. But you can see right here that they're totally not a real customer. They're a scanner. Sometimes you can spot what they're doing, and sometimes you can't. That's the Joomla content management system. Anyway, you can see the scanner there. It's probably something up here. These special characters are trying to inject something like this null byte is probably some kind of attempt to inject something. And there should be form data here. The form data is often malicious, and I think here it's just a null byte that they're probably trying to inject something after the form data. Anyway, all right. So once you find, so you got to find the name of the scanner. That's worth some points. Find the attacker's IP and the web server's IP. And then you got to find a defacement file name. And this is the challenge that's worth more points. Once you know the IP of the web server, you can observe that they are running their web server in a really sleazy way here. We've been talking about this in CCDC and everything. If you have a server on your network, the first thing you should do is configure the firewall so the server can never be a client. If you want to put something on your web server, you do not open a browser on the web server and go to some site and download it. That is awful. The reason it's awful is because in the first place, you should scan everything and make sure it's clean before putting it on the server. And in the second place, that is what the bad guy is going to do. They're going to try and get you to click a link, which will then open a shell from the server. So you want to configure your firewall so servers cannot initiate any outgoing connections. This network did not do that. The server makes an outgoing connection to something and downloads a file. And there aren't very many events where that happened. I looked at it. There are about 9 events like that. And one of them is the hacker downloading a defacement page to put on. So you can see what they used to put on the page to deface it. The rest are Joomla updates, which I found disrespectful. They just went to Joomla admin and clicked update so their server would connect to the Joomla server and download updates. And this is another good way to get hacked. You're not supposed to be doing that way. That is for amateurs, like your Windows 10 desktop. You do not update servers directly from the server in the management interface. That is for losers. Anyway, but anyway, it's good to see. Of course, we're looking at data where people did not do the perfect thing because we're trying to deal with companies that are beginning to use this and they're beginning to find out all the bad things they shouldn't be doing. And that's the point of log monitoring. You can detect unsanitary practices on your network and then perhaps change your policies or your firewall settings or something to get people to knock it off. Anyway, so start doing that and you will find a bunch more of these extra credit projects available. They are not necessary to get your certification. This Splunk certification is easy. You just need to know the stuff in these modules for that. But to really use it, this is very helpful. So any questions about anything? Well, that's all of this. I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to go to the lab and help anybody who wants help now. And I guess I'll see you folks in 3 or 4 weeks. And I expect there'll be a bunch more of these coming. I've got about 20 questions they wrote, and I'll probably write my own with adding a few more instructions and so on. And I'll certainly have instructions here about how to make your own server very soon. Because now that I've done it, I really want to practice it and write it down before I forget. Because it's very easy to foul it up. So, all right. Yeah.
So it looks like this conflicts with 124 again on March 9th. Is there any proposed?
Conflicts with 124? No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't conflict. I mean, 124 is in the morning.
Except it says CNIT 50 at 1 p.m. That's not true.
Let me see. Something happens on March 9th, you say?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this
Oh,
class.
I see. I
Yeah.
thought you were saying this one's the one down before.
No. The 124 is every week, and this is every occasional week. The only reason why this staggers so much is because of major cyber competitions and stuff get in the way. Yeah. All right. And I saw a chat message coming in. Oh, thanks. Okay, good. Is there a way to download the vid from the Splunk e-learning site? As far as I know, you cannot download the videos. You just have to watch them online. But you can download the slides and the projects. But yeah, I did not find a way to download the videos. I suppose you could use some kind of like YouTube capture extension or something. Okay. Good night, folks. Oh, no.